This is the perfect dip for the big game coming up this weekend. Let's make it. So this is bacon onion dip. I saw this first on Not Another Cooking Show's YouTube channel, so full credit goes to him. I'll link that below. But we're going to start with some thick cut bacon. I make mine a little differently than he does, but it's overall the same. You could kind of mix and match between his or mine on what you prefer to do. I'm going to use about half the pack of bacon. You could definitely use more. I do wish maybe I used 1 or 2 pieces more towards the end, but you can kind of mix and match as you go. If you have them nice and stacked like this, you could just make these widthwise cuts and they'll break into the perfect size pieces once you get into the pan. So don't worry about them being stuck together right now. That is totally fine. But just cut them up like this, 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, and you'll be good to go. You cannot add these fat pieces, but I think they help with rendering. And then throw these into I prefer a stainless steel skillet because you do want a little browning of the pan, but get that in nice and hot. Break them up, and then we're going to turn the heat down once they have been in there for a minute or two. While you let them sit there, let's chop up our onions. I like to cut the top off, not the root end, then halve them, and then I'm going to run these through a mandolin just to keep the pieces consistent, but I will show you how I would cut them also if I was doing it that way. You'll also see how the mandolin pieces do caramelize quicker. While you're doing that, just keep breaking these up. Right about here is where I would start to turn the heat down. You see they're broken apart nicely and they're starting to get that fat rendered. So give this about another 10 minutes in here and you'll know when they're ready. Take your mandolin then, open it up to the largest size possible, and I like to run the onion that direction. So I guess that's, lengthwise. Where you made the cut is where you want to start mandolining it. These pieces are fairly thin, but they're all uniform, which is what I want because I want them to all caramelize in the same time period and at the same rate. If I was going to cut them, though, this is how I would cut it. I'm just going to show you how I do it in this recipe. Cut them just around the equator of the onion here. These pieces, you'll also see in the caramelization process, take substantially longer to break down. There you got your bacon almost ready. You're getting some browning stuck to the bottom of the pan, which is great. All the fat looks basically rendered out at this point, but it's not foaming yet. There's what you're looking for. You want that foam. Once you see the foam, you know that these are done rendering their fat, and now the fat is cooking, and you're almost deep frying these. So you can, at this point, as long as they look crunchy and nice and where you want them, take them out. I like to use a slotted spoon. You don't really need to go crazy about removing the oil that they're in at this point, their own grease, but try to get as much of it as you can. It will make your lives a little easier. They won't just be sitting in the fat. Save as much of the grease as you can because we're going to use it to cook the onions in, but you don't need all of it. So I like to pour it out and then add it back in. I know it's a little silly. We're going to need a little more than that, and there you go. Now let's add these onions into the pan. Want to do it at about medium heat also to start these, and then we're going to turn them down, but start them right around medium high. And there you go. You don't really need to hear too much of a sizzle right off the bat, but there you can tell they are warm. And then we're going to break them up just because some of the hand-cut pieces are stuck together. The mandolin pieces are ready to go, but for the first few minutes, just kind of soften these. You'll see here right after, just moving them around, they took up some of that brown on the bottom, which is perfect. Sample your bacon then too. After a couple minutes of softening, we're going to add in 2 to 3 cloves of garlic, depending on how big your cloves are. Mine had some green in them, so I had to cut them out. So this is like 2.5 cloves. Then mix that all together. And now we're just going to let these do their thing. Turn it down kind of a little below half and let these caramelize, sweat, cook for about 40 minutes. You're going to see some browning on the bottom. Make sure it's not too rapid. You don't want them burning, but that amount there is totally fine. And just keep moving them around. I like to kind of flatten them out a bit so the surface area is maximized. Not Another Cooking Show uses sweet brandy, I believe. I'm going to use just a splash of vodka to deglaze the pan at this point. I'm also going to use a little water after, but anything you can, I don't even know if it's necessary, but just use some sort of liquid to help you scrape up the brown bits. And then that kind of will help with the browning of the onions. Here's the last little bit they had after the vodka sat for another 2 or 3 minutes, so they start to brown again. Now to scrape that all up, and you're gonna have these perfectly cooked onions. That's exactly the color you're looking for right there. So next we're gonna grab a food processor. You could use a blender too if you have that. Add your bacon, add your onions. Try to get as much of that goodness from the pan that you were cooking in into that blender or food processor. And then turn this into kind of a thick paste. You don't want it too thin, you don't want it too chunky, you want it somewhere a sweet spot in the middle. That's how I like it. And then we're gonna transfer this into a bowl. And once you got that in the bowl, the rest of the ingredients are very simple. We're gonna add sour cream. I like to do 2 big spoonfuls worth. Then 2 smaller squirts, probably teaspoons worth of mayo. At this point, you're also going to add in some other things, but I like to mix it up a little first. That way it's easier to incorporate. As you can see, it looks a little loose. That's because the ingredients were still warm. That'll rectify once it's in the fridge for a bit. Add a dash of Worcestershire. Fun to say. Then garlic powder and onion powder. Also at this point, taste it after you've mixed this for just salt and pepper in general. It shouldn't really need much more salt at this point, but if you think it does, add a little bit over the top. And then just mix that all together. And I'm going to throw that now into the fridge after I pat it down a little bit for, a few hours. Let it solidify, and there you go. You got this beautiful little bit of dip. It's nice and hard now, much more dippable. It's beautiful. It's an absolutely incredible dish. Everyone will love this for the big game. So check it out. Let me know what you guys think.